It happened on a Sunday evening over the clink of plates and the smell of roasted chicken. Mom had cooked, trying to keep traditions alive after Dad's passing. We were mid-conversation about bills and garden repairs when Marcus lifted his glass, cleared his throat, and said with a casualness that made my skin crawl, "Dad wanted the house in my name only." The words dropped into the room like a rock into still water. Ripples of shock spread instantly. My fork hovered in midair. Mom froze, staring at her plate as if the peas might rearrange into a different answer. Marcus didn't blink. He smiled, not the warm, brotherly smile I grew up with, but something sharper. The kind of smile you give when you've already decided the outcome. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just swallowed, letting the heat in my throat settle into something cold. That was the night I realized. Some betrayals don't shout, they arrive in perfect grammar. My name is Elena Ward. I am 35 years old, a project manager in a mid-sized tech firm. My job is to build order out of chaos, to spot risks, document every moving part, and keep the team steady when deadlines threaten to collapse. I've been doing it for over a decade. I thought that skill set was for clients and timelines. I didn't know it would be my armor in a fight I never wanted, against someone I never thought I'd need to guard myself from my own brother. Up until Dad's death, I believed family was the one sphere where I could turn my back without fear. I was wrong. Marcus, my older brother, is the kind of man who can win over a stranger before the handshake is even done. Growing up, he was the golden boy, charming, athletic, the kid who could talk himself out of trouble with a grin. Dad loved his confidence. Mom loved his decisiveness. And I loved having a big brother who made me feel protected. He was the one who walked me home from school, who taught me to parallel park, who said he'd always look out for me. But confidence can hide entitlement, and decisiveness can disguise control. Over time, I would learn that Marcus didn't just want to win, he needed to. And family was no exception. When Dad died after a sudden fall, grief was a tidal wave that knocked us all off balance. Marcus stepped in immediately. He handled the funeral arrangements, sorted through Dad's files, paid the outstanding bills. He told me not to worry about the legal stuff, that he'd take care of everything so I could focus on Mom. Weeks later, he came by with a neatly stapled will. According to this document, Dad had left the family home and all liquid assets solely to Marcus to manage expenses. The date? Last winter, right in the middle of Dad's medication changes, when his clarity came and went like a faulty light bulb. I studied Dad's signature. It looked right. But there was something about the way it sat on the page, the way the ink faded mid-stroke, that felt rushed. Or forced. I didn't accuse him, not yet. Instead, I made tea for Mom, listened to Marcus explain how complicated Dad's wishes had been, and nodded in all the right places. That night, I called the law office listed on the last page and asked politely for a full copy for my records. The assistant on the other end hesitated before telling me their office hadn't drafted Dad's will. They'd only notarized a single page brought in by a family representative. My stomach tightened. A single page? Not a full will? I thanked her, hung up, and sat at my desk with a fresh notebook. First line I wrote, "Do not let grief make you sloppy." Second line, document everything. If Marcus wanted to play this as a game of appearances, I'd play better. I wouldn't fight loud. I'd fight long. After that phone call with the law office, I started watching Marcus more closely. He avoided eye contact when the will came up, quickly steering conversations toward Mom's health or the weather. When relatives called to offer condolences, he always took the phone into another room. At first, I chalked it up to grief, but patterns began to form. Documents disappeared from Dad's desk drawers. Bank statements stopped arriving in the mail. When I asked about them, Marcus would wave his hand and say, "Handled it." He never said how. He never said where. And Mom, still fragile, trusted him completely. I said nothing, but inside I was recording every move. It's hard to hide lies forever. One afternoon while Marcus was out, I stopped by Dad's old study to check on a leaking window. That's when I noticed the corner of an envelope sticking out from under a stack of outdated magazines. Inside was a statement from one of Dad's accounts dated 2 weeks after his fall, showing a large transfer to a checking account I didn't recognize. The account holder? Marcus. My hand shook, but I didn't take the paper. Instead, I photographed it on my phone. Evidence, I reminded myself, works better when it's left undisturbed. A few days later, I called Dad's longtime accountant under the guise of asking about final tax matters. He sounded surprised to hear from me. I thought Marcus was handling everything, he said. I asked if Dad had changed his will recently. There was a pause. He mentioned wanting to make some adjustments, but the last formal version I saw had both of you as equal heirs. My pulse quickened. That was all I needed to hear to know the version Marcus handed me wasn't the whole truth. I decided to drop a small, calculated hint. Over coffee, I told Marcus that I'd been sorting through Dad's old files and found some interesting things. I didn't elaborate. He froze for half a second before forcing a laugh and changing the subject. That half second was worth more than any confession. It told me he was afraid. And fear makes people sloppy? All I had to do was give him space to trip. By the end of the month, my notebook was nearly half full. Dates, conversations, suspicious withdrawals, changes in Mom's mood after talking to Marcus. Notes from relatives who'd heard something strange from him. I wasn't just documenting events, I was building a case. My work training had taught me to track dependencies, risks, and proof points. Now my family was my project. And my end goal wasn't just to win, it was to make sure the truth couldn't be buried. No matter how deep Marcus tried to dig the hole. Mom became the unwilling referee. She trusted Marcus. Of course, he was her firstborn, the confident one. But she also trusted me. Whenever I gently asked her about Dad's intentions, she'd get flustered. Your father wanted peace between you two, she'd whisper, as if saying it too loudly might summon conflict. But her eyes betrayed her uncertainty. I noticed how she avoided looking at the will when Marcus placed it on the table, how she pressed her lips together when he spoke about Dad's wishes. She wanted to believe him, but doubt had already crept in. And that doubt was the crack I needed. Family dinners turned into silent chess matches. Marcus talked louder than usual, always steering the conversation toward how much responsibility he had carried after Dad's death. He wanted to paint himself as the savior, the one holding the family together. I let him talk. Meanwhile, I watched how Mom's shoulders tightened when he mentioned money, how she avoided questions about the house. I jotted down every reaction later in my notebook. Words fade, but patterns don't, and Marcus was writing his own downfall with every overconfident sentence. I knew I couldn't fight him alone. Quietly, I reached out to 2 of Dad's closest friends, men who had known him since college, who had played cards with him every month for 20 years. I asked if Dad had ever mentioned changing his will. Both of them said the same thing. Dad wanted fairness between his children. He always said you'd split things 50-50, one of them told me. He never would have left you with nothing. Their words weren't just comforting, they were ammunition. Independent witnesses who knew Dad's real intentions. Every part of me wanted to confront Marcus, to slam the suspicious bank statement on the table and watch his face crack. But strategy demanded patience. If I confronted him too soon, he'd cover his tracks. So instead, I did what I do best. I built a plan. Step 1, gather airtight documentation. Step 2, line up witnesses. Step 3, find the right legal channel. I wasn't just his sister anymore. I was becoming his investigator, his archivist, his quiet shadow. And the longer I stayed silent, the more he believed he was winning. One night, after Mom had gone to bed, I sat at my desk flipping through the pages of my notebook. The sheer weight of it struck me, weeks of dates, quotes, evidence. I realized I had already crossed a line. This wasn't about hoping Marcus would do the right thing. This was about ensuring he couldn't avoid the truth. For the first time since Dad's death, I felt a strange calm. The fear, the doubt, the hurt, they were still there, but underneath them was something stronger. Resolve. My brother had underestimated me. He thought grief would make me passive, but grief had given me a mission. And missions, I finish. The first real crack came from Marcus himself. One afternoon during a family lunch, he let slip that Dad had talked to him privately about the house. It was supposed to sound like reassurance, but it did the opposite. Mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth, and I caught the flicker in her eyes, a mix of confusion and suspicion. Dad had never been a man of secrets. He believed in sitting us both down, making us talk things out. Marcus's story didn't fit. And in that small silence, I saw something shift in Mom's trust. I didn't need to say a word. I just wrote it down later. Marcus contradicted himself. Witness, Mom. I spent evenings quietly digging through Dad's old files in the basement. Among tax records and yellowed receipts, I found an envelope labeled Will 2018. Inside was a typed draft leaving the estate split evenly between us. It wasn't notarized, but Dad's handwriting scrawled across the margins. Update with attorney. My chest tightened. It wasn't the final version, but it was proof that fairness had always been his intent. I photographed every page and slid the envelope back exactly as I found it. Piece by piece, the puzzle was forming. I wasn't alone anymore. Quietly, cousins and family friends began reaching out. One cousin said Marcus had bragged after the funeral, boasting that Dad trusted him more than anyone. Another admitted Marcus had discouraged them from calling me about financial matters, saying, Elena doesn't understand this stuff. Each story stoked my determination. He wasn't just trying to cut me out legally, he was trying to erase me from Dad's legacy altogether. And the more he pushed, the more people began to question his motives. I didn't need to convince them. Marcus was doing it for me. Eventually, I scheduled a quiet consultation with a probate attorney. I handed him copies of the notarized page, the suspicious bank transfer, and the draft will from 2018. He leafed through them slowly, nodding. This isn't uncommon, he said, when one sibling tries to take control. But you have something rare, a clear pattern and multiple witnesses. His advice was simple: keep gathering, stay quiet, and let Marcus act like he's untouchable. Arrogance, the lawyer said, is your strongest ally. He'll hand you the rope himself. Walking out of that office, I felt lighter. For the first time, the fight didn't feel impossible. Back at home, Marcus seemed restless. He called me more often than usual, asking oddly specific questions. Had I been in Dad's study? Did I talk to the accountant? Did I need help sorting paperwork? His tone carried a nervous edge, though he tried to mask it with charm. I answered calmly, never revealing what I knew. But inside, I could feel the balance tipping. For months, he had held the power, the story, the documents. Now, for the first time, he was the one looking over his shoulder. And I hadn't even played my strongest card yet. It was Mom's birthday when Marcus finally slipped. Surrounded by relatives, he raised a toast too long, too detailed, and mentioned how Dad always said I'd be the one to manage the estate. His voice carried that same smugness he'd shown months earlier. But this time, people didn't nod politely. They shifted uncomfortably. One uncle cleared his throat. A cousin avoided his gaze. I watched the tension coil around him like a rope. He was trying too hard. And trying too hard always means hiding something. By now, my notebook was full. Bank statements, the accountant's words, Dad's 2018 draft, testimonies from friends and family, it was all there. More than 120 pages of notes, evidence, and cross-checks. I printed backup copies and stored them in different places, one at my office, one with a trusted friend, one in a sealed envelope at the lawyer's office. Marcus thought he had control because he had possession of one document. I had something stronger, a narrative stitched together with facts he couldn't erase. Marcus called me late one evening, his voice unusually soft. You're not planning anything, are you, Elena? We don't need more drama for Mom. His tone tried to mask the fear underneath. I told him what I always told him. I just want peace. That was true, but peace didn't mean silence. Peace meant justice. And the more he pushed for reassurance, the more certain I became that he knew the walls were closing in. I hung up the phone, closed my notebook, and slept soundly for the first time in months. The following week, I arranged a family meeting with Mom, our lawyer, and 2 of Dad's closest friends. Marcus walked in confident, grinning like he had already won. But as the lawyer laid out the evidence, the notarized single page, the suspicious transfers, the 2018 draft, his smile began to falter. When Dad's friends spoke about his wishes for fairness, Marcus shifted in his chair. And when Mom whispered, "I knew it didn't feel right," his jaw tightened. For the first time, Marcus wasn't the loudest voice in the room. He was surrounded by truth. He tried, of course. He claimed Dad changed his mind, that the transfer was for household expenses, that everyone else was misunderstanding. But his words rang hollow. Too many contradictions. Too many witnesses. Too many documents. By the end of the meeting, even he realized the game was up. He sat back, silent, his face pale. The golden boy who had always commanded the room suddenly looked small, cornered. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't felt since Dad's passing justice breathing at the edges of the room, waiting for its moment. After the family meeting, the lawyer moved quickly. He filed to contest the will, presenting the 2018 draft, the suspicious notarization, and the financial transfers. The court requested Marcus provide full accounting of Dad's estate. Suddenly, all the bravado drained from him. His once daily calls to Mom vanished. Instead, he became quiet, evasive. Behind closed doors, I knew he was scrambling, trying to explain gaps in the paperwork. But courts don't accept charm. They accept evidence. And evidence I had in abundance. When the hearings began, something remarkable happened. Mom, fragile and grieving, found her strength. On the stand, she said firmly, "My husband wanted fairness between his children." Dad's friends confirmed it. The accountant repeated his version. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. Marcus sat there, hands folded, his eyes darting between me and the lawyer like a trapped animal. Every witness was another brick in the wall around him. Every document was another lock on the door. The judge was clear. The will Marcus presented was not valid. The notarization was incomplete, the transfer suspicious, the testimony overwhelming. The estate would be divided equally, as Dad's earlier drafts had shown. The house the symbol Marcus had tried to claim as his victory was legally half mine. When the gavel struck, a wave of relief coursed through me. Not joy, not triumph, relief. The truth had not been buried. Dad's wishes had not been erased. Marcus didn't speak to me after the verdict. He left the courtroom quickly, his shoulders hunched, his charm gone. Relatives who once looked at him with admiration now saw him differently. Whispers followed him at gatherings. He became the man who tried to cheat his sister, who disrespected his father's memory. In the end, he still had his half, but it was tainted. Everything he touched from that point carried the shadow of what he'd done, and he knew it. That was punishment enough. Now, when I walk through the family home, I feel Dad here. His voice in the creak of the stairs, his laughter in the garden, his presence in every wall. Marcus tried to take it all my share, my voice, my place in the family. But instead, he gave me something else, resolve. I fought quietly, strategically, patiently. And in the end, truth won. My brother cut me out of our family. But I turned the truth into a verdict. And that verdict set me free. If you like this video, please comment and subscribe.